Much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to be able to rise and speak on this bill and acknowledge how well dressed the Speaker is actually, particularly admiring his tie there, Mr. Speaker. It's a very common thing on this side of the House today, I see. Mr. Speaker, this bill that the Minister has brought forward to the House is one that the Labour Party is prepared to support through to Select Committee, because we do understand that there have been a number of issues raised around the efficiencies and the operations of the Arts Council, or Creative New Zealand as it's commonly called. But our support for the bill only is to Select Committee. We do have a number of concerns about, which in fact the Minister himself alluded to at the end of his speech, about representation and about the ability of the restructured Council to fairly represent the diversity of people in New Zealand and fairly represent the arts communities of New Zealand through this model. So we will be wanting, when the bill goes to the Parliament's all-powerful Government Administration Committee, that we will be wanting to hear a wide range of submissions at that time. And in fact, I would be encouraging the Government Administration Committee to go out and seek direct feedback from Māori and Pacific communities, and also from other communities in New Zealand, particularly the growing Asian communities in New Zealand, because I think it is worth noting that Creative New Zealand has a very difficult job in balancing together the different communities in New Zealand and the different arts communities in New Zealand, and creating a structure such as this on paper looks efficient. It looks like it will allow for more direct accountabilities, but it does raise questions about the ability to be representative of those different communities, and that's certainly what we'll be looking out for. Mr. Speaker, any change that creates efficiency in a government body is a good thing, but efficiency has to be balanced against the purpose of an organisation, and the purposes of the Arts Council continue to be reflected in this bill, and they are certainly ones that the Labour Party strongly supports. The Arts Council has done, as Mr Finlayson mentioned earlier, some excellent things and funded some excellent programs, many of them events and troops developed under the Labour government, and we're very pleased to see that those things are continuing. But when we look at the purposes and principles of the Arts Council, it is to recognise the cultural diversity of the people of New Zealand, recognise the arts of the role of Māori as tangata whenua, the role of the arts and Pacific peoples, and support participation and involvement in the arts and access to the arts. And Mr Speaker, that is another concern that we also would like to take up at the Select Committee level, is the role of community arts councils, and I appreciate the fact that the bill continues to provide for community arts councils at a local level, but we do need to make sure that the arrangements facilitate those community arts councils being directly accountable to their communities and also representative of them. And it would be fair to say that there are some concerns around different parts of the community arts sector about whether this model will see arts moving further away from local communities and more towards major towns and centralised into perhaps what some would call a Wellington-based mindset. Myself, obviously, being someone who perhaps has a Wellington-based mindset, I can understand though why people perhaps in Mr Hayes's electorate in the Wairarapa may look at some of the proposals around and say what is in this for the provinces. And obviously those concerns are heightened with the recent announcement by the Arts Council around the recurrently funded organisations. And we look, particularly perhaps at the theatre sector, where we see that in the new Arts Leadership Fund that's been put forward to replace part of the recurrently funded organisations' funding, or put out for discussion. Sorry, yes, Mr Finlayson, of course. It's obviously a consultative process, but there's quite a lot of concern in places like Palmerston North and Dunedin, where it's quite likely that they will get no recurrent funding, and that will be, obviously detrimental to those communities. Because at the moment, the proposal would tell us that there will only be support available for 3 theatre companies, one in Christchurch, one in Auckland, and one in Wellington. And in fact, that even presents problems in Wellington, where there are currently 2 theatre companies who get recurrent funding. So there is concern about the direction of the Arts Council in terms of regional and provincial arts support, and anything that's done structurally, as it is in this bill, that might exacerbate that problem is something that we'll be watching extremely carefully. Because the one thing that I hear or the two things I hear from the arts community as I travel around New Zealand is some dissatisfaction with the way in which arts is funded. Certainly in regional areas that's never been any different. Whoever the government is, people who miss out on funding are always upset about that. But it's important to have a system that ensures that funding is spread around the country, and people are concerned about that. The other issue that people... Indeed, and the other concern that people have is around the question of certainty and the ability to be able to plan within the arts community. And I think that is the chief concern of those people in provincial areas who look set now to miss out on recurrent funding, is they may well be able to apply for the shorter term funds that the Minister is proposing, but that doesn't give them or their communities certainty about the future of arts funding. So these are the issues that I think the Select Committee does need to take up in some detail. On the question of representation, it is all very well to say that there will be Māori representation on the new constituted board and Pacifica people's representation, but it is very difficult, as many people in the House will know, when boards like this are set up. It puts a great deal of pressure on those members, on the 4 members who are Māori, or the 2 members who are of Pacifica origin. It will put a great deal of pressure on them to be able to represent those communities, and I think that's something we need to work through in the Select Committee and see whether it will provide the kind of representation of those communities we need. As I stated earlier, we also have some concerns about other communities who are developing artistic profiles in New Zealand, particularly Asian communities. And indeed, and a number of us have attended Creative New Zealand funded events, in fact, involving the Asian community, and I think most of us would like to see that develop more over time. So it will be important that the reconstituted Arts Board is able to represent those concerns. There's also the concern of the matter of youth participation in the arts and making sure that perspective continues to be seen. So these are the issues that we'll be wanting to tease out. I do just want to mention, Mr Speaker, another comment that the Minister made, that the Council is now no longer going to be able to... it's a very important issue, Ms Dean. That the Council will no longer have to put in place a 3-year strategic plan. It'll be using the Statement of Intent process. Again, that's an issue in terms of certainty and planning, and I actually think there is some justification for a longer-term strategic approach by the Council. Ministers and those who've worked in ministers' offices know all about the Statement of Intent process, and it's not as perfect as it might be. And of course, everything in your office is perfect, Mr Finlayson. Of course, absolutely. A life of blameless excellence that the member has led. But it's not actually, I don't think it's actually sufficient for the Statement of Intent process to guide the work of the Arts Council. I think that the 3-year strategic plan process has been a good one, and certainly the Labour Party at this point anyway would be seeking to have that reinserted into this bill. Mr Speaker, it isn't always possible when we're at arts events, as Mr Finlayson and I often are, to be able to say that we're covering all the arts, and that's the thought that I'd like to conclude on. It's vitally important that the Arts Council supports balanced provision of arts. Mr Finlayson and I will be going to see a performance of the Orpheus Choir in a couple of weeks' time here in Wellington, and no doubt he'll be attending many other events as he does. He may even find his way down on one day to Barbadega, perhaps to see some of the New Zealand music that's performed down there, or go to Palmerston North to see the Centrepoint Theatre. We need to continue to support balanced provision of arts in New Zealand, and we need to ensure that the structure that sits behind that in terms of the Council is structured in a way that allows them to facilitate that balanced provision of the arts. That's what we'll be seeking when this bill goes to Select Committee, and we will make our judgment after the Select Committee process on whether we will support the bill any further.
I call James